Okay, so we're back. Apologies about that for those who were tuned in. I think I was asking you, Dale, kind of just with everything that's going on across our community, across our nation with COVID-19. A lot of, I think, just uneven playing fields were exposed. We always talk about inequities as it relates to financial increasement in our communities and just different things that I've heard you talk about. That's some of it is over my head, and I'm like, I'm learning a lot. But how does that relate to where we are, and are we really taking in new information and taking the seriousness of getting ahead?
Well, you know, so here's the challenge. Like, it's cool that we're protesting police brutality and social
Mm-hmm.
justice and all of that, but fundamentally, every community that has ever thrived has done so off the economics side of
Mm-hmm.
their equation. I mean, at this point, and I've been telling people, like, even though I'm definitely, pro people, going out and expressing themselves in the way they see fit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm old enough now to remember Rodney King in 1992, and the Los Angeles riots, and the Cincinnati riots, and obviously more recent Eric Gardner, Trayvon Martin.
Mm-hmm.
You can keep going down the list. Like, these things have been a perpetually recurring pattern in the United States since we were brought over here on slave boats. And so you have to kind of look at it and say, okay, if we do riot when things happen, first of all, we have to ask ourselves is why can't we get anybody to move unless a black individual dies, which is or gets beat up, like in the case of Rodney King, really bad, and the LA police
Mm-hmm.
got off. Why is it an act of violence has to be perpetuated against a black person for us, first of all, to mobilize ourselves at scale and then to get people to pay attention to our needs?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a question that not enough people are asking, and it sets a bad precedent that people are relatively slow to move in the nation if there's not a significant and very public, killing of an African American person.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're having that conversation enough, at this point in time. Second, I don't think we've consistently prioritized our economic condition enough, even though, it's clear that that's what drives, a lot of this behavior. Like, we'll go back and we'll say Black Wall Street all the time and say, oh, it's great. Why can't we have Black Wall Street? Well, it's because we spend so much time on social activities, on issues of
Mm-hmm.
social justice and civil rights instead of building our own stuff. And it's not like these are debates that are new. Like, I'm not the first one to talk about the necessity of black economics as a foundation for community growth and social justice. I mean, you go back to the debates between Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois. They were debating the same thing, with W.B. Du Bois being much more on the social agitation side. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, this is a very general characterization of their positions. And then you have
Mm-hmm.
Booker T. Washington coming out and saying, we need to own our stuff. We need to work in the trades and all of those other things. And the same debate is carried over through. So, I mean, folks got to realize that the last report by Robert Fairley, who's a really great researcher on minority businesses, their report showed 42% of all black businesses in the nation have closed their doors during COVID. And this is compared to 17% of white businesses. So over double have already closed their door at this point. And it doesn't mean that they're not going to reopen. Like, we're not going to reopen these businesses. But what it does kind of show you is that the fragility of our economic condition
Mm-hmm.
is high. Historically, our unemployment rate has always been twice, the national average. We're the first to get fired, the last to get hired. You probably heard that.
Yeah.
And then you start layering over the public health impacts, like black people are trending to get sicker from COVID faster, higher mortality rates. And we haven't even talked about what that does to, household income when you can't work because you're sick.
Right.
So we basically can't do our own philanthropy. Like, who do we go to for our philanthropy? Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not people that look like us. Maybe we'll crowdfund for things like funerals, And go out and sell chicken dinner. Like really, but when we need that big money to do the things we need to do, where are we going? You
That's
know,
true.
it's not to the black philanthropists, because although we do have some black people at wealth, that kind of historical institutional philanthropy where big dollars are set up in a very systematic way to fund their issues that they want to fund, we're not present in that. How about even venture, capitalizing our own firms? Like we may do some crowd equity on some platforms or some, what not GoFundMe, but there was another one, the Kickstarter, and do some small dollar raises, but we're not having, our entrepreneurs exit with the big, $1 million exits and turn around and refund angel and venture capital. So
Hmm.
everything that we doing is going outside of ourselves, right?
Hmm.
So we go outside of ourselves, meaning that we go outside of our communities, our families, people that share our same, historical context and background, because we have to, because we have no economic
Yeah.
base to deal with what we're dealing with. And at a certain point, we need a significant wake up call to say, look, it doesn't matter how many prayer walks you do, and I'm pro prayer walk,
Hmm.
but along that prayer walk, you should be spending money at a black business or collecting dollars to be able to begin to invest in firms and opportunities for black people to start and run businesses.
Yeah, it's how important is that? Because we hear now with Buy Black, of course, which we all should be doing 365 days out of the year. And we know statistically proven that the dollar it goes and it lasts longer in the communities in which we spend. And so we see now, even just for example with 18th and Vine, Bayou, it's like, man, it's closed, and how that really hit them hugely during this pandemic, and just different other restaurants that I've heard that are not opening. So does that make a difference, Dale? Like if we would have supported them maybe before, or was it always bound to happen because of maybe we weren't prepared for what you're talking about now, that we should always be 10 steps forward in economics and how that applies to our daily lives, especially being Black and people of color?
I have an interesting take, and it's interesting because I made this statement a while back. I was actually do you know Zawan Love up there used to run Casey the buyback platform in Kansas City.
I've heard of that, but I'm not familiar with.
So this is a while back, probably my
Mhm.
third or fourth year at the Fed. One of the people I look up to, Dr. Claude Anderson, Dewan brought him in to speak, and then I did a panel afterwards. And in Casey, you had the Buy Black group at the time. I don't know if they're still there, and they had their shirts, and I've been making points. Uh, the point that it's more important to build black than to buy black, and
Mm.
there's a logic to it. So when you look at the black businesses that we currently have, when we say buy black, we're usually talking about retail, right? Maybe some service, but retail. We're not talking about the supply chain. So we're not talking about, the black wholesaler, the black manufacturer, et cetera. We're
Mhm.
usually talking about those that are in proximity. So the store down the street or whatever, if we need our roof or whatever done, somebody to come in and do that. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But if you build black, you buy black becomes an organic thing, becomes a natural thing because you increase what is known as business density. So, and I know that that family that spent the whole year in Chicago buying nothing but black products, was a big thing. They wrote a book, and I'm just like, okay, that's cool, but you're
Yeah.
asking a whole lot from the average black person who has less disposable income. So let me give you a scenario.
Okay.
So I can go to Walmart and get everything I need there at a reasonable or low price at one shop. Or I could go to 5 to 10 different black businesses to get everything that I just got at Walmart. And the price point is going to be higher. It's not only is it going to be higher, but then you have to factor in the additional time cost and the transportation costs. So you're asking a lot for black people who already have lower disposable income. Many of us, especially the lower income, have difficult transportation problems to now try to figure out a way to go and find everything they need. And in many instances, our communities don't even have the things that they would traditionally need at their shops and services,
Yeah.
right? So if you build black, what you do is you begin to create a level of business density. And what most people don't understand is we say buy black because we're talking about buying those that are in proximity to us in terms of the retailer service. But the reality is all research shows that black businesses that sell beyond their community make more money and are more successful over the long run.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna hit you to some logic right now. So the people we should be promoting buy black campaigns to are not black people, it's white people. Why do I say that? Because they're the ones that have the disposable income. They're the ones that have the higher average household income and the ability to come and support and service our businesses at scale. So if I'm teaching you, if I'm a fisherman, right? Do I want to go to a market where do I want to go to a pond that has a gang of fish that are biting every time I throw in a hook, or one where I may catch a hook, I may catch a fish, once every 4 to 5 hours. And so we're not using logic oftentimes when we develop these strategies, or even when we think through it. We do things because they feel good, even if they're not strategically or philosophically strong. I'll give you an example. So I'm not sure if you remember, let's see, probably 4 or 5 years ago, where I think everybody was on that big Killer Mike was doing it, and everybody was, bank black. Everybody's got bank black, and they were doing a run up on all of these small dollar accounts and these black banking.
I think it was Breakfast Club that was a part of that a lot.
Yeah, it could have been. But see, here's the thing. This is where emotion and logic, do not necessarily meet. So there's something called Partnership for Progress. And Partnership for Progress is congressionally mandated engagement between the FDIC, the OCC, and the Fed, all three bank regulators, which is designed to support MBDIs, minority depository institutions, so black banks, right?
Gotcha.
And try to help them because they're declining. Like I think in the early 1900s, we had like 180 black banks. Right now, we have 21 in the nation. Banking is a very hard industry to be in. So, we're out there, and I'm talking to a bank president, and I said, "Hey, man, tell me what you think about this campaign, this Bank Black campaign." And he said, "Dell," he said, "Here's the problem." He said, we will not say this publicly, but this is our reality. He said, we lose money on all the accounts that are being brought over. So you have to understand. So banks make a certain amount on an account, but every account has a cost, right? So you can't, if a bank takes your money, there's a cost to that. You have the technology management, you have the servicing of the account, all those different things. So if your account doesn't maintain X amount of balance, right? Then that bank is actually losing money on your account. So like the bigger banks, they'll give you a free account with the anticipation that they can get you into more products. So here you had a scenario where all of these individuals were thinking they were righteous because they're going into these black banks and opening up these accounts with $100 and thinking that they did right for their community. But the bank was actually losing money on a lot of these accounts, or barely breaking even, because they make more money on the bigger accounts, the accounts with a higher dollar volume, the business accounts, et cetera, the accounts where they can stack services. So here you had people like, Killer Mike and other folks that were going out and pushing this huge campaign without ever talking to the bankers about how banks work, right? Because if you talk to bankers about how banks work, black bankers, about how black banks work, they're going to say, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't say that. I don't know who they talk to. They may have talked to banks. I don't know. But what I can tell you is what the bankers told me is that it was designed so that they were actually losing money on these deals. But of course, they're not going to go to the public and say, wow, don't come and bank with us.
Right.
But if an intelligent strategy, not an emotional strategy, was put in place, a logical strategy, they would have sat around with these banks, these bank presidents, said, how do your banks work? What is it that we can do to ensure that if we're going to push and promote you, that you're actually going to be able to support and generate revenue from this to continue to build, your book of business and scale up your bank so you can ultimately serve more people of all races, but particularly black people, right?
Right.
So then you design a strategy around that. So it's all about thinking through. We got a lot of people talking about economics and And I'm not an economist. I'm an economic developer and an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurship trainer. But I know enough about economics to know that we have enough people talking about economics, economic development, and entrepreneurship that have no clue what they're talking about. It's a
Yeah.
it's a it's a it's a buzzword, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
a thing that they say we need to improve our economy, but they don't do the due diligence and the homework to say I really understand how this stuff works.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear this time and time again. Like I could start pointing out names of people who you hear say stuff, and people will turn around and quote them. And I'm like, I'd say one, Malcolm X. Malcolm X wasn't an economist. Malcolm
No.
X wasn't an economic developer. He was an intelligent guy and could use and apply, a basic logic to general situations. But yet we would come and we quote something Malcolm X said about economics as if it was gospel,
Mm-hmm.
versus looking at a Dr. Claude Anderson and say, well, Claude, spent
Yeah.
extensive research on this and laid out an entire platform. Maybe we should be quoting somebody who actually did the homework and the deep research and laid out a thesis and strategy.
For
And it's
sure.
not that Malcolm said anything wrong,
Right.
but it's the fact that if I'm going to listen to somebody, I'm going to listen to somebody who that's what they do.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
And in our community, we have this cult of personality. You're probably way too young to remember that rock song. One of the greatest rock songs by this black band called Living Color back in the late 80s, maybe early 90s. Cult of personality. They talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we hold up our pastors, right, as the authority on everything. We hold up our leaders as the authority on everything. The rational person is going to say, no, I'm going to hold that person up for what their skill set is, his or her skill set is. And if they don't have a skill set in there, my first thing is to question,
Mm-hmm.
why are you talking about this? And do you have a logic behind it? Have you done some research? Because just because they're not an economic developer or an economist doesn't mean that they haven't done their homework. But my first eye on them is going to be like skeptical. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, you're a preacher, bro, or says you're a preacher.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're going to tell me, what it is to do economics in the black community. I'm not
Yeah.
saying I'm not going to listen to you, but you got to show and prove me that you really understand what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And we need to apply our logic like that across all of our major areas, and then move forward that way.
Yeah. I feel like you dropped a whole pull on us and me. And no, I do not know Living Color, but I'll look them up. The rock song
It's
after
called
this.
cult of personality.
Got it. What should we've all had some major loss. So if I'm that entrepreneur and I'm probably right now maybe just trying to figure it out, or a business is closed and I had to dissolve it in some capacity, what should be my mind frame and kind of my next steps in moving forward?
Yeah, first of all, I'm empathetic because I know it's hit us hard, and I've
Mhm.
worked with easily over 500 black businesses in my time, from back when I was a banker to just
Mhm.
being a community trainer. It's hard to be an entrepreneur, and those that manage to do it and do it well deserve our respect, because it's not easy, to start. It's difficult. There's a lot of things that work against us, and now you have a pandemic like this hit that's just
Mhm.
laying a hammer on us, right? Just
Yeah.
laying a hammer. But here's the thing, right? Which I would encourage, all the entrepreneurs that have struggled or maybe had to close, is that you were able to start before and you will be able to start again. The economy is not going to be down forever, and you've already demonstrated that you've had a level of skill to be able to start a business and keep it moving in the first place. Also, some people were going to have to really look at going back into the labor market. I've been telling people I think there's going to be kind of this switch going on. Like you're going to have people coming from work where they lost their job because their business went out of business, they got furloughed or whatever, and they're going to be like, oh well, I'm gonna start a business. Then you have business owners who've been closed, and they're gonna be like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm gonna go back to. So you're gonna see this,
Okay.
and this is gonna require a lot from our communities. Like uh, people are gonna need to get trained. Like
Hmm.
this is what I tell any entrepreneur, regardless of whether they lost their business and need to reopen, or whether they're coming from the labor market into entrepreneurship. Don't just go get help. Go get
Yeah.
training, join a chamber, network with your peers, talk to other people. Don't have that ego, because I've seen it where you think you have to do it all alone, and you think that you're the only one that knows how to do stuff. You got to get a support network. That's what community is for. Community is to commune in unity, right?
Yeah.
The concept of commune means, that we're interacting with each other, and unity is in a cohesive way. That's community. So if you're an entrepreneur, find your entrepreneurial community. It doesn't have to just be Black people. Get in groups with people. Carlinda McKinney, I don't know if you know her, but she's launching a tech business in KC. I can't remember. She just changed the name, but it was a tech business. And she's actually, if you all want to go see her interview, it's on our Kansas City Fed website on our Black Women Startups page.
Okay.
And she said something really interesting. That's kansascityfed.org. And then go to the community tab and small business. But she said, I had to create a network of Black people for when I felt I was experiencing issues related to my race.
Yeah.
And I had to create a community of support for me for women when I thought it was related to my gender. As she was going through her deal. And we're notorious for, this is all entrepreneurs. And so I'm not just including Black people in this.
Sure.
We're notorious for undervaluing what we call social capital. So social capital is those networks of relationships that provide you resources, and resources is not always money. Sometimes it's just support, encouragement, somebody to talk to. Sometimes it's a mentor, somebody who's been there and that can give you direct advice. Sometimes it's somebody that can turn you on to a deal, right? And these often come with your associations, being in your chambers, just picking up the phone and calling folks and say, hey, I'm trying to start a business. Can you help me out? Things like that. We often undervalue that. And those are the things that are really important, because what's really weird is people will say, well, I feel so alone as an entrepreneur. And what they're really saying behind that is not that they don't have friends. It's not that they don't have supporters, but every journey is on you. Because I'll tell you the difference. So I have a business and I work at the Fed, right?
Yeah.
So when I work at the Fed, do I get to do a lot of creative and innovative and quote unquote entrepreneurial stuff? Absolutely. But that's different than when everything falls on my shoulders for the business. Because I know at work, at the Fed, I got my insurance, right? I got my office. I got all of my technology. I know I'm going to get a steady paycheck. Boom, boom, boom. As an entrepreneur, I don't know any of that. My paycheck comes from me producing, whatever I'm going to produce or whatever I'm going to sell. My technology, my computers, all of that had to come out of my pocket. It wasn't just something that was given to me by virtue of working, right? So when people say they feel alone, what they're saying is that the burden of entrepreneurship falls squarely upon their shoulders if they're a partnership, them and their partner.
Yeah.
And that it's a journey that it's very individual to that person, even if it's in the same industry.
For sure.
So the way to get through that is to find people who, are aligned with your same energy. Like if you're trying to be an entrepreneur, get around entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Don't just play PlayStation. You spend some
listen to Little Baby, Dell. Listen to Little Baby.
Be intentional. Be intentional about being around people, and it doesn't mean that's all you're around. But you need to be around people who share the same energy that you do in any walk of life, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. If you're trying to go down a pathway, a direction where you want to get, you got to align yourself with people with that same energy. Otherwise, people are going to pull you away from that, or they can. It's easier to be pulled away because they're not bringing that same energy to the table as you are.
Yeah.
So we got a lot we can do.
Yeah, it's a lot that we could do. Time flies when you're having fun. So I have two more questions. What will it take? We've heard this term coined a lot as white allyship, and executive leaders in our community and across, the nation, I guess, that are kind of in the same work as you. You guys are critically important right now, in my opinion, because like you said, you understand, and it's a it's a perspective in which a lot of people don't carry, and you guys have to constantly think about if that is your line of work or if you've had experience in that area. And so when we talk about policy change and implementation to providing that, like what should executive leaders who maybe are in the economic development space be thinking about to leverage those opportunities for people of color?
Yeah, and a lot of this will come out. We'll talk about this in the new Small Business of Color Recovery Guide that should be coming out in a month or so.
Okay.
But, we broke it down across a couple of dimensions, and so I'm not going to go through the whole one, but let's start with the one
Sure.
we all like to talk about, which is credit and capital. Everybody says, well, what do you need to be a successful business owner? I just need money. That's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
Although you will need resources. But so first of all, let's talk about, we need a radical restructuring of the way we underwrite loans, right?
Mm-hmm.
So policymakers can advocate for that. And if they can't get any systemic reform in terms of how banks are doing underwriting, then we need alternative lending solutions that can supplement what the banks can do. I'm not super hypocritical of banks because of the regulatory structure in which they operate. Like,
Mm-hmm.
people think just because a bank is black that they can turn around and just lend the way they want to lend. That's not true.
Right.
Banks are heavily regulated. They're difficult to start, run, and be successful in. So if you can't get some flexibility in banking underwriting, then you need to expand like local community lending organizations like community development finance institutions and others like that, microfinance institutions, and then also look at fintech, other forms of lending that have a more flexible type of lending structure for our Black businesses. Look at more cash flow based lending instead of, we got to get away from. So if we look at the history of discrimination in the United States, one thing that has made it very difficult for the average Black person to do is develop household assets, right? So like, we don't have assets. We're like have 10 times less wealth than the average white. Projection that the average Black wealth would be zero in like 2050 or something like that, right? But your assets are what are often used as collateral for loans. So if historically, because of redlining and other factors, like discrimination, we don't have these assets, and it's carried forward to us, this generation, we're gonna have harder time going to getting a business loan.
Yeah.
We're gonna have harder time funding our own businesses because about 50% of all businesses are self-funded by friends and family, or maybe other people that we can sell on it, not going to bank. So we need to figure out ways to do kinds of funding that are outside of the traditional credit market that can get our businesses some capital to start and scale.
Yeah.
That's when the big thing is education, right? I asked on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, I said, would you rather have $10,000 and no mentorship and no education and training, or would you rather have 5,000 with mentorship and education and training? It was almost 9 out of 10 that said they would take the 5,000 with mentorship and education.
Yeah.
It's because it's not just about having access to capital. It's about knowing how to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
It's about learning, having the wherewithal to learn, your craft, understand the business, and have people that will support you and teach you and sometimes handhold you along the way, right?
Yeah.
That's huge. And we often don't have that. So if you give me those two things right there, then and you have increased education and training in culturally competent way to places where Black people want to go and learn virtually or in person, then you're going to go a long way to starting to improve our condition, especially if you get the flexible, capital in the community. You give me those two things and you get a better culture of entrepreneurship in our community, we're going to be okay. I mean, think about it. Honestly, really think about it. I want your audience to think about this. Anytime Black people in the United States have been given a half a fair chance to do anything, we've knocked it out the park. I mean, think about that. Like, think about the places we found the most access, which is often the music industry and in athletics. In both of those scenarios where we were given a reasonably fair shot, equal shot, we've knocked it out the park, And if we get a fair shot in the other, areas that make a strong and healthy community, we're going to do the same.
Yeah.
Like most people don't realize that, coming out of from I think Emancipation Proclamation was 1876. Over the next 50 years, I could be wrong on that, but I think that's right. Over the next 50 years, Black people coming out of slavery started 180 banks, over 180 banks, over 180 colleges. Their black businesses grew by 1,150% in 50-year period of time. Right? This is coming out of forced servitude for a large percentage of us over a 50-year period. So these are things that we can do. It's in us. We just have to kind of rearrange our priorities a little bit, in my opinion.
We got a lot of work to do.
But it's not that hard. See, that's the thing. It's not. Well, let me put it that way. It's hard, but it's not that hard. It's kind of a paradox because we have everything that we need right now. Black women have grew 1 million businesses in a decade, from 2002 to 2012. Like, that's ridiculous, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Black people as a whole started businesses way more on average than the average white person during white business during that same period. The difference is type of businesses and size of businesses. So when I say reprioritize, like what we have to understand is that we can do good things that aren't the best things for us, or we can do good things that are done out of order and they won't be the best things for us. So the example that I give, and people with bad backs will get this. Let's start switching around your vertebrae. All the vertebrae could be there, but let's take your lower back vertebrae and put it on top, and let's see how you walk. Let's see the pain.
It's gonna be jacked.
Everything's there, right? It's not that everything isn't there. It's that everything is misaligned. And what we need is alignment. And to me, the alignment starts by setting your foundation, which is your economic base.
Yeah.
This is the last stat for you all, unless you have another question, which we can answer.
No, I don't.
Okay, so here's the last stat. So I'm a firm believer that if I say something, that I want to achieve something, I need to be able to measure it. This is my problem when we talk about racism. Like, okay, how do you know if racism increases or decreases? What are you measuring to determine that? I hear, well, racism is less now than it is, or racism is more now. Well, how are you measuring that? Is it just the way you feel? Because a lot of people feel different about different things.
Yeah.
So what I said was, if we're going to talk about economics, then we need to start developing measurements to be able to show that. And outside of the traditional measurements that you have in the field, like entrepreneur rate, entrepreneurship density. So I created two ratios. One is called the JPL, job production ratio, JPR ratio, and the other is the business leakage ratio. The JPR ratio is really simple, and people understand this as soon as I say it. Let's take all the Black people who currently have jobs in the United States right now, not counting COVID, because this is just crazy. I don't know what's going to happen with that. But let's say before COVID, right? All the Black people that had jobs. Now let's take that number, and that's your numerator. Now let's take the number of jobs that we produce from Black businesses. So, now the numerator and the denominator, for those who remember division. And then you just divide those, and you get what you call your JPR ratio, job production ratio. And depending on how sophisticated I get it, the most basic, without weighting or anything like that, we have 7 jobs that we need for every one that we produce. So for every one job that a Black business produces on average, we need 7. So we're about 6 short, right? Yeah, so both white population and Asian population need 1.25 jobs for every one they produce. So they're almost 1-to-1. They're almost producing as many jobs as they would need as a group, while we only produce 1 for every 7 that we need. So that's one. We're not producing jobs that are able to sustain, our communities and our population. So the other one is the big business leakage. And so when you talk about recycling the dollars, like you mentioned before, it's somewhat similar to that. Although people keep citing that number about 20 minutes or whatever. Don't believe that stuff. Like that's like an urban legend, right? If enough people say something, people just believe it. But I trust me, I've looked and looked for the research behind that from the Urban League or whatever, and I've never seen it. So until somebody can prove to me that that's true, I'm not going to believe it, because I work with economists, and I asked our economist, I said, hey, Kelly, how would you calculate how much times the dollar recycles hands at the community level, like for black people? He's like, Dell, I don't know. So I'm like, I work with the best economists in the nation, and they can't tell me. But
Yeah.
one way to get it at the national level is what we call leakage. And so leakage is basically how much income does your community have to spend versus how much is spent on their products.
Mm.
And so what I showed was that, and it's very easy actually. This is an easy one too. I took what is called the per capita income, which is the amount of income on average that every black person in the United States earns. That's men, women, kids, etc. You just take it and you divide it, and there's a number. You
Okay.
multiply that number by the total population, and that's what we call your purchasing power. So our ability to go out and buy things. So you take that number and you divide it against how much revenue our businesses produce. So this is what I showed. White businesses generate $2 for every $1 of white purchasing power that they have. So 2 to 1. Their businesses are generating 2 to 1. Black businesses generate 20 cents for every $1 of black purchasing power that they have. So essentially that 80-cent difference, even though it's not, because black people don't just sell to black people, white people just don't sell to white people, right?
Right.
But when you use that as a basic measurement, basically what it's showing is that white businesses are generating dollars from other corporations and ethnicities at a greater number than what their people are spending. Black people are spending more money outside of their businesses on average, or they're not attracting dollars from other ethnic groups into it to generate the revenue that we need for our community. So if we just start with that, our ability to produce jobs and our ability to generate at least equal revenue
Yeah.
to what our purchasing power is, if we can start seeing progress in those, we will see an increase in black economic power. It's just math. So, and if we use that as a litmus test for how we're actually doing in the economy, among a couple others that I would throw in there, then those should be like our dashboard, right?
Yeah. The foundation. Yeah.
Those would be our dashboard, and we say, okay, our community is doing well because this year we had, let's say, one entrepreneur for every 100 people. In 5 years, we had 2.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 and you start measuring that, and that's your objective. You set your strategies around that because you backdoor your way into economic prosperity, economic and social power if you improve the rate of and the strength of your economy. Why? Because you can now pay for an attorney. You got local philanthropy that you can use to support your protest and everything. You don't have to go outside of your community. Maybe you got a crazy idea that traditional philanthropy won't fund, and you got a philanthropist that's black that understands what you're trying to do and gives you that cash. Now your community sets their own priorities instead of to rely on external groups, like the city government and another philanthropist to say, yes, black person, you can go do this in your black community because I can give you a check to do it. It's like these are common sense things that every other community gets intuitively, and we have to keep making explicit because we've never been taught this.
Well, we could go on and on because I know you're very passionate about this. We need to do a part 2 of this
Sure.
since we had some tech issues tonight, but I want to thank you for coming on and spending your time with me. I know you mentioned that it's past your bedtime, so you need to go night.
Oh man, no.
Tell the family thank you for you lending to come on up next. But yeah, I think what you provided tonight, when people go back and watch this, is a lot that, like you said, just it's laying the foundation, or I'm sorry, in your terminology, the dashboard that we can refer to 5, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and so forth to build Black empowerment back into our communities, which will ultimately have stronger economics. And so hopefully it's all math. I've learned a lot from you tonight. And if we interpret those things, and if we do that and pay attention to the purchasing power and why that is, and how we can be better at it, I think we'll be stronger in the long run. So thank you for coming on. Much success to you. And I want to thank everybody for watching Up Next tonight. Share this broadcast. Tell your friend. Meet me back here Wednesday. Going to have Lisa Benson. She's going to talk about Anchor and Bias, her new book that just came out. So I'm excited about that. 8:30 p.m. We'll be right back here. See you soon.
See ya.